Hello and welcome back. I am Ashley. So I was browsing YouTube today and I came across a video by Olive Fellows over at A Book Olive about comfort reads. And apparently there is a comfort reads tag created by a girl over at the Babbling Bee. I'll link both of their videos down in the description below just in case you want to see it yourselves. Apparently there was a whole list of comfort read questions that you needed to fill out, and I didn't realize that. So I started pulling all kinds of books that I found comforting and reread over the years. But once I wrote down all the book tag questions, I organized them by what I thought fit the questions the most. Unfortunately, I can't fit in all my comfort reads in this, and I'm sure if I did this again later, then my answers would completely change again. But anyway, let's get started. Okay, I actually wrote down the questions because I wouldn't be able to record and remember all the tag questions. So let's get started. Okay, number 1, The Kettle's On, a book of steadfast comfort, always there for you, makes the day better like a warm drink. So the one that I chose for this one is Water for Elephants. This one I've read several times. I used to read this one once a year, sometimes twice a year. I haven't read it in a while. I'm sure people think it's just one of those pop culture books that get popular for a while and stays on the New York Times list and then disappears. I'm not sure how substantial literature it is, but I find Water for Elephants by Erin Gruen to be very comforting to me, and I always go to it when I need a little pick-me-up. It has a happy ending. It's just comforting to me. Plus, I love elephants, and there's a very cute elephant named Rosie in there. So that's what I picked for number 1. So number 2 is Grandmother's Quilt, and it's a book that reminds you of a loved one or a comforting book that was given to you or read aloud to you by someone dear. I had a hard time with this one because I've been given a lot of books and I've read a lot of books too. Recently, my husband and I read Into Thin Air together. It actually took us a couple years off and on. Just read it whenever it struck us to read it, and we recently finished reading it a couple months ago. And so reading Into Thin Air with him is something that reminds me of our time together reading it. But the other books I don't have with me. They're still at my mom's house. They're a lot of Roald Dahl books, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Witches, just pretty much the majority of his books of BFG and such, and also the Folk of the Faraway Tree trilogy, the Enchanted Wood, the Magic Faraway Tree, Folk of the Faraway Trees. When my Nana was still alive, whenever she came over to visit us from England, she would bring me a book from England for me, whatever book she thought was interesting, and it was mostly Roald Dahl books and Enid Blyton books, mainly the Faraway Tree books. And it made me happy, and whenever I see those books, I think of her because she's the one that gave them to me, and I've enjoyed them for many years. Number 3 is Warm Spices. It's a book with a particularly vivid prose or imagery, a story comforting in its richness, depth, or vibrance. And for this one, I picked The Christmas Box by Richard Paul Evans, and it's also part of a trilogy, but this one always brings up images of Christmas for me because I read it every year around Christmas time, which I need to start reading this pretty soon since it's December. And the one particular scene is when the narrator sees Mary in her den reading the Bible, and there's like these little tear stains on the book, and that's always a vivid image for me. And so this one was what came to mind when I thought of vivid imageries, as well as The Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg. I don't have my copy here either, but I think it's the pictures that did it for me, because you could see the warm colors and the hot cocoa and the wolves running through the trees and Santa Claus holding up the bell, and that just reminds me of Christmas a lot. Okay, so number 4, Candlelight, a book that keeps you going or encourages you when things feel dark. I had a hard time with this one because the books that encourage me changes and depends on what I'm feeling. So I ended up picking Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The series was a big thing in my childhood. I was growing up when the books were coming out every couple years, so essentially I grew up with Harry Potter, and I like the ideas of good versus evil, and good always overcomes evil no matter how many times it comes back to try and get you. So that's why I chose that one. Okay. Laugh Medicine is number 5, and it's a book that makes you laugh out loud or grin wildly. For whatever reason, I don't read a lot of light-hearted books. I don't know why that is. I tend to read books on the heavy side of things. I do remember reading All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot when I was a kid. This wasn't the copy that I grew up with, but I loved reading about James Herriot's traipsing about the country, taking care of all the animals, and it's just a lighthearted read that made me smile, and especially with all the animals. And this dog reminds me of my first dog, Domino. She was not a border collie, but she had the same black and white coloring, and whenever I see black and white dogs, I immediately think of her, and that makes me smile. So there's that one. Number 6, In Bed All Day. What do you read when you're curled up in bed all day or for a couple of hours? Any book really. But one day I went to take the day and reread the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They're very long books with lots of detail, and it just seems like a book that I would stay in bed all day and read all over again. I also thought of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo trilogy, because that's also something I would like to curl up in bed and read all day, just because of all the details that would keep me going. Number 7 is Endless Comfort. It's a book that brings you solace no matter how many times you've reread it. So again, this was hard to decide, but I ended up choosing Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. I read this back in 2014, I think, or 2015. The movie was about to come out, and from the commercials, I thought, well, hey, that looks like an interesting book or an interesting story. When I first saw the Me Before You cover before the movie came out, I was like, oh, it's just a fluffy love novel. But when I saw the previews for the movie, I was like, oh, I'll give it a go. And I got the book like 4 or 5 days before I saw the movie, and I read it in like 2 days. And that's how good it was. And since then, I read it probably once a year since then, maybe a couple times. But I really enjoyed the story between Louisa Clark and Will Traynor. Some people think he's a bit of a jerk, and his choices at the end are kind of a jerk move, according to some people. But I like the way the story wrapped up. You know, it was I don't know. I have conflicted thoughts about the ending, but I think in the concept of the story, it worked, I suppose. But yeah, this is one I reread all the time, and I'm always rooting for Louisa and Will and hoping that he changes his mind by the end of the novel, which he never does, but I still hope, and I like how he encourages her to get out more and do things that she never would have thought she would have either. But yeah, this is one I go back to no matter what, because it gives me such comfort to read. Portable Hope is number 8, and it's a book that restores your faith in humanity. I wasn't sure about this one, but the first one that I thought of that I have is Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. I just enjoy her thoughts. Even though she's forced into hiding from the Nazis in order to save her life, she has such high hopes for the world around her and hoping that things will get better, even though she's living in these dire circumstances. And that kind of gives me hope that even if we're living in bad times right now, that we can get through it as well, no matter how dark they get. Number 9 is A Basket for Your Neighbor. Imagine you were putting together a cozy comfort basket for your neighbor, friend, loved one. Which books would you include? Well, all the ones that I just talked about. But if I had to narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3, I would pick The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, because it's kind of a suspense thriller and with a little bit of history in it. It kind of makes you think about different things, which I really enjoyed. I would also pick The Fault in Our Stars. Sorry, I couldn't remember if it was In My Stars or Our Stars by John Green. This is one of 2 books that I read by John Green, and I thought it was very touching and something that I connected with it so much, so I wanted to be able to share that with other people who might not have read it yet. And then the 3rd book I would put in the basket for a neighbor or friend or loved one is the Little House books. This one is my leather-bound copy of it. It's the first 5 books, but I'd probably give them Little House on the Prairie and Little House in the Big Woods just to get them started on it. Because these 3 books kind of cover different things, love, travel, family, mysteries. Okay, so the last one is A Walk in the Woods. Tell us about a book with a beautiful nature writing or a book that restores your inner peace. So first book that I thought of was The Call of the Wild by Jack London. So this book is told from the dog Buck's point of view. He is captured from his California home to be sent up to Alaska to be a dog sled dog. So there's a lot of descriptions of nature and what's going on for him in order to survive. And that's definitely has a lot of nature. White Fang is also a book that has a lot of descriptions of nature in it that I enjoy, and I need to get a copy of that. The other one was what I talked about earlier, is Into Thin Air. This is by John Krakauer. This one's not necessarily a happy book, but it does describe about mountain climbing and how hard it is to climb up mountains such as Everest. And it does describe kind of some horrendous things that happened back in 1996 when a bunch of people got stuck up on Mount Everest. So yeah, I don't really know what else to talk about that, because it's basically about a mountain and mountain climbing and survival, and it talks about all those different things. So those are some of the books that I picked out for my comfort read. What books have you read that I shared with you today, and what would be on your comfort read book tag? So anyway, I'm glad you stopped by to discuss your comfort reads with me. Please like this and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and please give me a comment down below. Thank you.